Good afternoon. I am Patricia Liquanan. Welcome to Voter Conversations, organized by Edu and Sux 2022. We are an informal network of private and public colleges and universities that convened last year to work on voter registration and education on campuses. During the voter registration period, we focused our efforts particularly on first-time voters among students to enable them to register and to vote in the coming national elections. We are now concentrating on voter education and have embarked on a series of election-related fora, which we call Voter Conversations. March is Women's Month, and our voter conversation is on Women in Politics, Break the Bias. The Philippines scores consistently well in gender empowerment and gender gap indices. For many years, the only country in Asia to make it to the top 10 of the Global Gender Gap Index of the World Economic Forum. The formal policy environment recognizes equality between women and men and the important role of women in national life. The Philippine Constitution has an explicit gender equality provision. There are significant and progressive laws, such as the Magna Carta of Women. The Philippines was the first country in Asia to have an anti-sexual harassment law, which has recently been expanded in the Safe Spaces Act. There is a gender budget, which sets aside 5% of the budget of all of the government agencies for programs on gender equality and women's empowerment. While the United States is celebrating its first woman vice president, the Philippines has had 2 woman vice presidents and 2 woman presidents, and some extraordinary women in high positions. And we must add, the Philippines has a strong and vibrant women's movement, women NGOs that push for and support progressive laws and policies and make their voices heard on important issues. So there is a lot going for women in the Philippines, but there are problems. Things are not as rosy as they may seem. Women outnumber men in school enrollment and graduation, but these accomplishments in education do not necessarily reflect in better access to decent jobs, nor to parity in work and promotion opportunities. Men's average wages are higher than that of women in both rural and urban areas, and women are underrepresented in top administrative and managerial posts, and especially in political leadership. We see that de jure equality, or equality in law, is a necessary but not sufficient condition for de facto equality, or equality in fact. The huge advances in creating and improving legal frameworks on women's rights have not always translated into women actually enjoying these rights, as social norms continue to pose a challenge to gender equality. Negative attitudes and stereotypes exist and operate in society. This is particularly obvious in politics, where factors of entrenched discrimination operate. A large percent of the population believe that men make better political leaders than women. Thus, women continue to be seriously underrepresented as candidates for public office, although they make up over half of the electorate. From 1998 to 2016, the percentage of women elected into public office ranged from 16.1% to 21.44%. In the 2019 national and local elections, only 20.16% of the candidates were women. Today, 85 out of 304 or 28% members of the House of Representatives are women. And in the Senate, 7 out of 24, or 29%. 25.4% of mayors are women, and only 14.7% of governors. In some cases, the growing involvement of women in political life and leadership has actually been met with intimidation and violence. To share their experience and views on women in politics and the challenges faced is an exciting group of young women starting out in politics. We have 4 students who were elected to head the student governments of their universities and 2 young mayors. We have structured this conversation somewhat differently from past conversations. We will start with all speakers making brief opening statements, introducing themselves and their path to leadership. They will also share initial thoughts on women and politics. After these opening statements, much of the time will be spent in a group discussion with the speakers responding to points raised by the moderator. Questions from the chat box will also be entertained. First, let us hear from our young women presidents of student governments. Our first speaker is Maria Georgina Escoto, the president of the student government at De La Salle University. George is pursuing a BS in legal management. She is active in youth-led organizations, Kilos Co Youth, which focuses on creating more progressive, sustainable, and empowered communities, and Sagip Kapwa, that unites donors and volunteers to respond to the needs of communities during times of natural disasters and emergencies. Welcome, George.
Good afternoon po, Ms. Lekwanan.
Hi.
So, a pleasant
I'm glad you could make
afternoon.
it.
Yes. Do I begin na po?
Yes, please.
All right, thank you po. So, a pleasant afternoon to everyone. I apologize if there's some noise in my environment. I'm in a public space. So, I'm honored to have been chosen as one of the speakers for today's event entitled Women in Politics, Break the Bias, most especially with the lineup of women that I'm presented along with. While I have been introduced earlier, allow me to tell you a little bit more about myself. So, I am Georgina Escoto, but I prefer being called George, and I'm from De La Salle University. I am only 21 years old, and I'm often described as the outspoken and strong willed USG president. I have been told that it is difficult to change my mind, especially if I know that I am in the right. And while some people may
Agree.
expect that I was not always like this, that I was shy and quiet growing up, and only pursued this path during late high school and college, my mom would love to tell you otherwise. So, growing up, I have always been the type to speak up and stand up for myself. I remember always wanting to be group leader and class president, much to the ire of the little boys who wanted to do the same. I never really put much thought about how my gender played a role in my place in society. And I think it was because as I grew older, I was privileged enough to be in environments that put a premium on what I do and how well I do it, whether I am a man or a woman. And for other people, not so much. So, not many people know the story, but it was in November 18, 2016, when I swore that I would become a lawyer and a public servant one day. Prior to that, I only entertained thoughts about pursuing law or medicine. So, why is that date so specific? Well, it was the day that the late dictator Ferdinand Marcos Sr. was allowed by the Supreme Court to be buried in the Libingan ng mga Bayani, a resting place that growing up I thought was reserved for heroes who put the Filipino people first, not those who pillaged their country and left thousands killed, tortured, or missing. As the news played in the background, I think the leader in me was awoken. Later into that school year, I entered the student council in San Beda, Alabang, my very first real experience leading hundreds of people. It was then that I learned that I was good in writing policies, and which is why in college I tried my luck being a legislator. In an election open to more than 1,000 people, I won. So 2 years later, the playing field became larger. I was now wooing thousands of people in my bid for the USG presidency in De La Salle University. So, thankfully, and armed with specific plans of action and a decades old brand of leadership, I now represent more than 19,000 students. The work is not at all easy, but with my executive board, we realized that aside from being one with the students, we had to stand in solidarity with the entire nation. So, with the many issues that plague our society, young leaders recognize that there is much to be done. So I just want to share that of the 5 executive board members of the USG, 4 are women, and I lead them in this endeavor. I've come to experience the definition of true leadership, and it is not at all based on gender. Being of service, I guess, requires heart, and heart does not take into account what's in between my legs. I am not new to politics. I have seen and experienced firsthand how it is within and outside the walls of my university. Local and national politics in the Philippines are marred with corruption and misinformation. For women in politics like us, we may have seats in decision making tables, but our capabilities are still doubted. Take, for example, the incumbent vice president and how she is criticized for being a weak leader just because she is a woman. May we and those who will come after us never experience this bias, and may our attempt at breaking it today be successful. Thank you po.
Thank you, George. Our next speaker is Karen Michi de Guzman. She is president of the student government of the University of Southern Mindanao, where she is an English major. She was host for the Kabakan Young Leaders Congress and a chief of the Girl Scouts of the Philippines. One of Carmi's main involvements is working with local barangays through a project called Municipal Advocates for Kabataan Empowerment, or MAKE. She also manages her own Korean-inspired restaurant. Welcome, Carmi.
Hello po, good afternoon.
Hi.
It's nice to see you, Miss Patricia, since we've been communicating, virtually. So it's nice to see you, your beautiful face.
Nice to see you too.
Okay, so good afternoon to everyone. Thank you for allotting your time to listen to our speakers this afternoon. So my greetings of peace and goodwill to everybody. I am the University of Southern Mindanao University Student Government President, Karen Michi de Guzman, who is also a student board of regents, a self-made businesswoman, a straight Dean's Lister student, a former young beauty queen, and a volunteer in the community. It is during this month of Women's Month that my name is brought to the forefront because of my experience and contribution to others. In the past, I think and I believe I couldn't participate in events like this because I was too afraid to speak in front of a large group of people. I decided to keep quiet since I didn't think I could do anything to help the youth with my remarks, especially I am a female. It all started when I earned my badge as a Chief Girl Scout of the Philippines when I was in high school. However, I was able to increase my self-confidence and refine my leadership abilities via several leadership camps organized by various organizations such as this. I was in the batch Alwage and Kamalayon, batches of Cotabato Young Peace Builders Camp, and Cotabato Young Leaders Congress. I am now involved in the province of North Cotabato and the local government unit of Kabakan and involved in a volunteering group called CY from the Congress Cotabato Young Leaders. We are a movement of empowering the youth of the Cotabato province, especially for those marginalized area. I was also the youngest Miss USM at 16 years and the youngest mutya ng Kabakan at 17, and the rest is history as mutya ng North Cotabato. As time went on, I was elected to serve as the governor of my college, the College of Arts and Social Sciences. So during the United Kabataan Leadership Parliament, which I organized, I was the camp director and the MAKE camp manager. So actually, we went to 103 barangays to conduct youth empowerment programs. And these are all volunteerism. So all of our facilitators and staff are all volunteers. So this year's national elections and campaigning have made me extremely delighted that women may run for government posts, especially because I am one of them. Even though the vast majority of these candidates are males, witnessing women fight for their rights. I think there's something wrong with my campo.
We hear you, but yeah, we don't see you.
Yes, ma'am. I think there's something wrong with my camera po.
But you have you turn on your video.
Yes, ma'am.
That's too bad. But anyway, go ahead. We hear you well.
Okay po. Thank you. Okay, so where were we? Okay. Even though the vast majority of these candidates are males, witnessing women fight for their rights and empower other women in their campaigns makes the Philippines a better place for me. So I respect the ability of women in the province of Cotabato, especially our governor is a female, our vice governor is a female, and half of our board members are all female. And of course, our mayor is a female here. So I respect them that they are participating in discussions and advocate for equality in terms of culture, religion, and gender, especially here in Mindanao. We are composed of tribe people. So in my opinion, there aren't any issues or roadblocks that would cause women to question their own abilities. So in the workplace, politics, and society at large, I think it's time to stop discriminating against individuals based on their gender. And I saw that this generation, particularly women, as completely empowered with the ability to speak up for others and change the world for the better. So I am very much honored to be one of the speakers for today's event. I hope we learn a lot from each other. And I would like to extend my heartfelt gratitude to you, Ma'am Patricia, for inviting me. So thank you very much and mabuhay po.
Thank you very much, Carmi. Next, we have Stephanie Christine Landicho, who is president of the Supreme Student Council of the Technological Institute of the Philippines, where she is pursuing a BS in Industrial Engineering. She is also the Vice President for Communications for the Philippine Institute of Industrial Engineers National Student Chapter, which is the premier organization for industrial engineering students in the Philippines. She has represented TIP in a number of international conferences. Welcome, Steph, our engineer. Go ahead. Unmute. You're muted. Okay.
I'm sorry.
You're okay. You're okay now.
Am I audible po?
Yes, you are.
So thank you, Miss Mom Patricia, for inviting me to this women's talk. And good afternoon, everyone present here today. Oh, wait, I'm sorry, my connectivity is
But you're okay. We hear you, Steph.
okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Again, beginnings, as they say, are not always easy. My leadership journey started when I joined PII-NSC as an ambassador. I had no prior experience, but I knew that I wanted to be part of the organization. I told to myself that if I put in the effort, I will succeed. It has always been my mindset. It's what inspires me, even to this day, to take on the most difficult roles and tasks. I've been really fortunate to have several individuals that aid in my work and personal development, and I would want to assist others the same way. In 2020, I sought the presidency of our department student council as an independent candidate. My passion to enable students to seek out opportunities for their growth drove me to apply for the role. Well, it was a shocking news to everyone, as being a female presidential candidate without allies was unusual. A woman on rise and ascending to positions of leadership. I remember people telling me that they wanted to run, but they are too afraid, and that my journey to presidency inspired them to become ambitious and follow in their path. It was that moment that I realized the magnitude of my actions. I have created a small impact by believing in myself and standing up for what I love. The fact that women are seen in politics demonstrates that we too are capable of leading. Women leaders are visionaries. We promote an agenda of inclusive transformation that benefits society. It is prudent for our opinions to be heard at the highest levels of decision making. And in situations where it is not possible, we must learn to build our own table. I believe that we cannot effectively achieve change without women's political engagement. We should encourage women to recognize their worth as leaders and join them in these endeavors. It will require a great deal of effort, yes, but I have no doubts that we can do it. I wish to serve as a role model for other women and show them that they can be anything they want to be. May we enable one another to carry out this vision. Come and let's work on it together.
Thank you, Steph. Finally,
You're
we
welcome.
have Micah Reambonanza, who is a philosophy major at Silliman University, where she is president of the student government, representing the College of Arts and Sciences. She was president of the Debate Society and Philosophy Circle and secretary of the Visayas Debate Union. Micah is co-founder of the Sillimanian initiative Ulysses, which is a relief effort to aid those affected by Typhoon Ulysses. Welcome, Micah.
Hello, Dr. Patricia and call. I'd like to greet everyone once again. A good afternoon. Thank you so much for that introduction, Patricia. It is really an honor to be with everyone this afternoon. I'd like to just make my sharing quick. I'll try my best to make it quick and short. If my internet connection is a bit unstable, you can just freely call me out in the chat box or just call me out if I cannot be audible or I cannot be understood. But I'd like to really sharing my story journey as being a leader. As much as I hate talking about myself, but I feel a starter of the discussion of women in politics. Actually, I'd really acknowledge that I do come from a background of privilege, and by that, the community that I was part of in my youth, starting up to junior high school, that already recognized women in politics. So actually, I come from a very small town in Visayas City. And in 2 years there, we've already witnessed women, but also multiple came in local government. So that was already an example. Us youth, women in youth, women can also lead. This kind of culture, this kind of environment allowed me to believe in my, somehow carried it on high school and college here in Siliman. But it was here in Siliman that we're open to the bigger. My background as a woman in society is not a universal, not an experience that all were afforded of. It was an experience that was very exclusive to a few society. In fact, share when I decided as president here in Silman University, I remember someone telling our local language still understand kontra mapildi ka. If I might translate that, it means running against a guy because I was running against was a man. He immediately said, "You're gonna," and I think that was allowed me to reflect. Might be multiple Micahs out there, the same thing. Thousands, hundreds, women out there that were down because of gender. And I believe this forum we have right now is us trying that culture and trying narrative that gender does not, or capabilities, create the opportunities that. So I'd like to this experience of mine to a bigger picture, to the macro women in politics. What has allowed, I'd like to reflect and allow us all, what has allowed our right now in politics and position to run. At some point, I believe that it is systematic structure allowed us to run. For example, in city, it was a political point that were not discriminatory that allowed me to gain support and run for position. And that begs, do other communities have the same structures? Do other communities have the same privilege? And I that in the Philippines communities that kind of recognition in politics, and I believe that is the biggest challenge that we have here with the 150 participants in this call, us to ask ourselves, how can we change that? How can we structures within communities that will allow us, not only women, and also other members of the LGBT community, other members of the entire gender spectrum, have positions in politics, to have position bigger changes in entire governing structure in the Philippines. I'd like to start here in Silman University, for example. One of the biggest structural change is of the gender fund, which is an exclusive thing meant for activities that are on women empowerment, but empowerment. It's includes programs and activities focusing on the LGBT community. Also, the university has focused on and providing academic scholarships to women or exclusive to certain demographics that are oftentimes not given attention or not recognized. So, or what I'd like to share for this after, really for all of us, especially for people in the LGBT community, for example, that are already in position to recognize what in the past or what structures and environments were we exposed to that were exclusive to us, but we think should not be exclusive at all, should actually be afforded to every other community out there, regardless of their location, regardless of their, for example, university, whatnot. And in my case, for example, the non-discriminatory that were present in Silliman University allowed me to be in this now. And I hope that we end this forum late, bring that kind of reflection on how can we provide more structure, provide change in the community of that we can afford more women to be in position. We can support women, and going beyond that, even people from the different part of the spectrum. So the short sharing that I've provided has allowed us to reflect or even on how we individuals can really make changes in our of governance in the Philippines. All from my end this afternoon, and I hope we really have a fruitful discussion ahead of us. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Micah. Okay, now let's hear from our young mayors. First, we have Trina Firmalo Fabic, who is the mayor of Odiongan, Romblon. Trina,
Hello.
welcome. I'm glad you're here. I was nervous for a while. Trina has a Master of Public Affairs in International Development from Princeton School of Public and International Affairs. In the Romblon provincial government, she has served as Chief of Staff and was OIC Provincial Administrator. I'm sorry. She was founder and chairperson of Sulong Kabataang Romblomanon, an organization focused on youth empowerment and development. Welcome, Trina. I'm so glad you made it.
Thank you, Ma'am Tati. And maadong hapon po sa tanan. Ma'am Tati is nervous because I've been unreachable for a while. Nasa campaign trail po kami ngayon. We've already started locally campaigning. So the schedule is a bit tight, and I also asked permission to leave a bit earlier later because we have a function later. I first want to thank you for this event, and I thank you for the invitation. Also, I'd like to thank our young women leaders, the ones who spoke before me. I think it's very inspiring. The future looks very bright, no? With women like you. So go, go, go. And of course, to my fellow mayor, kay Mayor Sweet, and to all of you, I just want to share very quickly my leadership journey. And if you can see the slides in front of you. So after I graduated from college, my family is from Romblon. So I worked with the Office of the Congressman many years ago. This was how I started. And during this time, Romblon is composed of 200 plus islands and islets. So, but 7 main islands. But it was very eye-opening for me to see the situation of the people on the islands. So this was how I started my journey. And then I was very fortunate to get a full scholarship to Princeton University to do my master's. And during this time, my eyes were opened up to a global kind of perspective. So during this time also, I was fortunate to do my internship because we were required an internship in Sudan for a few months. And this really gave me a different lens in terms of development. So this was very fruitful in terms of how I would view issues related to development. I also had a few experiences in Vietnam, in New York, and other places. Again, all these were building blocks for the foundation of my leadership journey. When I came back to the Philippines, I worked as a regional supervisor for a DAR-funded program. This was for agrarian reform beneficiaries. And then I worked as executive assistant or chief of staff for the office of the governor. This was during the time that my dad, who was a doctor in Manila, decided to run for governor. And so we helped him during this time. We started with 100 million deficit, and we worked towards building back the financial infrastructure of the province. We came up with a lot of inclusive programs for different groups, for women, for PWDs, for senior citizens, and the like. Yeah, and then in 2016, or in 2015 rather, I said, I think I could do this, like I think I could do a better job than some of the people who are in office. So I decided to run, and I was going against the incumbent mayor. What I did was that I went house to house. Every day I would walk 8-9 hours to reach all the houses that I could, so that people could understand what I wanted to do for our town. And so luckily I won by a slim margin. And because of that, I was able to carry out programs. One of my flagship programs is the Barangay Caravan, where I bring all the services of the municipality, of the municipal hall, down to the level of the barangays. We have schedules going around, and we bring not only the services of our offices, but also national government agencies like PhilHealth, GSIS, we have DTI, DOLE, and the rest. No, and this is a way for us to really show the people that government is accessible, that government is there for the people. So there. So it's been an interesting and challenging journey. And some of the things that I want to share, we also have a transportation food allowance program, is that being a woman is very difficult in leadership. When I was going around, people would tell me, ay, hindi ako boboto sa'yo, babae ka, mahinang leader ang babae. And a lot of different stereotypes. And because I was relatively young, that even contributed to it. There was an intersectionality of my youth and my gender. So all these things, it's very challenging to break the glass ceiling. But once you do, you find that others are willing to step in as well. Ever since I started, a lot of young women have expressed their desire to go into public office as well. And in fact, some have already been in public office. So it is a continuing challenge, but if we just keep on working on it and show people that we are capable and competent, then we will be making the way easier for the others who will come after us. That's it for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Trina. Finally, we have our last mayor, Juna Flores Ceriles, is the mayor of Dumalinao in Zamboanga del Sur. Mayor Sweet is the president of the Zamboanga del Sur chapter of the League of Municipalities. She spearheaded youth projects such as Go Green Dumalinao and Tanom sa Kaugmaon, a youth agricultural leadership camp. She is proponent of the Gugma para kay Juana sa Tunga-Tungas at Pandemyas, a livelihood assistance project for women and their families during the time of COVID. Welcome, Mayor Sweet.
Hello po, Dr. Liquanan, and thank you very much for having me here. It's nice to meet you all virtually. I'm very inspired to hear my other fellow speakers, the young women leaders that we have here. And then hello po kay my fellow mayor, Mayor Trina. Thank you very much for inviting me here to speak and to be part of this forum, Women in Politics. My name is Jonna Flores Sweet Ceriles. I go by the name Sweet. Currently the municipal mayor of Dumalinao, and I'm serving my second term. Nung una, a lot of people are asking me, why am I in politics? Bakit ka naging mayor? So often I always reply na wala akong choice. For the information of everyone, my husband, he comes from a political family. And then in my mind, kasi I've been advocating for rural women empowerment and youth empowerment. And sa tingin ko, you don't need to be in the position and the title to lead or to make a change. Kaya when someone asks me, bakit ka naging mayor? I always answer that, wala akong choice. Another question they always ask me is that, ano do yung pros and cons of being a woman leader? Sabi ko, there's this question na the negative part of it, the positive part of it of being a woman leader is that a woman by nature is nurturing kasi. That's what you call that the feminist leadership. It's always about inclusive leadership. So that time that before ako naging mayor, I do women empowerment, I do community services and volunteer work. So I was listening to the young speakers earlier. I can see myself. Ganun din ako eh. I went to leadership camps, nag-volunteer ako. So, being in a public service, hindi na siya naging mahirap for me. So, nagiging positive side nun is that doing my advocacies while sitting as a municipal mayor, I wouldn't be spending much out of my pocket kasi I will be using the government's resources for my advocacies at the same time expanded it. Parang nagiging malawak na yung programa ko for women and youth. The negative part of it is as a municipal mayor, ang dami mong dala. The problem of the municipality, they call it from womb to tomb. So parang you lose focus on your advocacies when you have to entertain all those problems. Ngayon, medyo, I haven't prepared much of my presentation kasi like Mayor Tina said, nag-start yung local campaign last March 25 and actually right now I came from a community outreach. Ginagawa ko rin yung hatod serbisyo ng barangay, just like she mentioned, carrying out all the services from the municipality down to the barangay. But I want to share also yung mga that I don't limit to my municipality. I've worked with Women Empowerment Movement, a rural improvement club, which I started 2012. It's about empowering rural women. Ano ba yung ideas nila and ano ba yung gusto nila. And from that, nakikita ko yung mga challenges, mga kailangan ng mga women, and linking them to the national government agencies as then to local government unit that can provide intervention for them. And until now, ginagawa ko rin siya. Kaya yung na-mention ni Dr. Licuanan kanina about gugma sa tunga-tunga sa pandemya program. I call it a livelihood program. It's a livelihood program out of love para it's to give income to the women, especially those na wala ng trabaho, umuwi dito sa probinsya. And I've also been working with youth on women, on environment protection, education. We have Sagip Ka Mag-aral right now that I'm working with. Ginagawa nila, nagtututor sila ng mga bata na nasa bahay ngayon, especially those who are struggling to read, the non-readers, and then dun sa reading comprehension. So dati I was also a young leader like the other speakers that I am with right now. But now na naging mayor ako, naging consultant na lang ako. Being a woman leader, it's very challenging because you have to manage your time between your family, your business, and managing a bigger family, which is your municipality. Pero kahit nung unang sinabi ko siya, I have no choice. Kahit sinabi ko nang dati, may negative part of it. But there are lots of learning. And for me that I've been working in the communities and as a volunteer, marami akong natutunan and mas nagiging malapit ako sa tao. And in that way, being in the position, being a woman leader, magiging instrumento ka to link the women, to link the youth to the government, to the national government agencies that can help or can give them intervention kung paano nila abutin yung mga pangarap nila. So for the coming election, yung mga kalaban ko, dalawang lalaki. But on my first term, I was unopposed, and my second term, nanalo ako ulit. So for this election, and of course, I will saying this also for our, VP, may the best man, the last man standing is a woman. So thank you very much and good afternoon po.
Thank you very much, Mayor Sweet. And thank you to everyone. It was fascinating to hear your stories as you climb the path of leadership. And we will get to that, to leadership and politics. But first, let us talk about just the problems of women in general. The format now is we will have a group discussion, and anyone can come in when they feel like it. So it won't be individual speakers. Let's have a group conversation. So the first, I'd like to ask all of you, you have been so immersed in community work. You are very familiar with your constituents, those of you who are in politics, and even the students are very involved in community work. What have you observed to be the major problems that women in our society face, particularly during the pandemic? Let's start with that, no? And before we go specifically into politics and leadership, what would you consider the most important women's issues that people should pay attention to? Who would like to start?
Can I go ahead?
Yes, go ahead, sweet, please.
Yeah. Okay. I can speak based lang po sa on my municipality. So during the pandemic, we have an increase cases of incest rape, which is makikita mo kasi yan, most of our constituents living in one house, walang division, walang rooms. So and the time the pandemic, during the lockdown, most of the people, they stayed at home. So eto yung isang nakita ko na tumaas na case in my locality. Another one is teenage pregnancy. Of course, if there's rape, there's also this teenage pregnancy. So way back 2019, we only have about, I think 11 cases of teenage pregnancy. And last year we have about 41. Grabe ang taas. It's very alarming. And of course, violence against women. So these are some issues and that our women face during this time of pandemic that I can say in my locality.
Thank you. Yeah. Anyone else? What issues of women do you think we should pay attention to, particularly now during the pandemic? Any of the students?
I think I can go next po.
Sure, George.
When I was pondering this question po, there were 3 points that I was able to list down, and I also had a conversation with my women's rights professor on this, so it's very timely. So the 3 points are domestic violence, unpaid labor, and sexual harassment and abuse, just as Mayor Sweet was able to share with us earlier. So when the pandemic happened, there was a spike in domestic violence, and this is compounded by money, health, and security stresses, and the movement restrictions that we have, especially when the lockdowns happen. So this usually happens in crowded homes, and because there's also reduced peer support. So domestic violence reports actually spiked or surged upwards of 25% since social distancing measures were enacted globally. So what we can do with this is we have to support women and girls facing domestic violence with access to legal assistance and judicial remedies, and it's really urgently needed. And the second one is unpaid labor. So before the pandemic happened, women did nearly 3 times as much unpaid care and domestic work as men, but we are still paid less. So this is actually a stigma that we know all too well, not only in the Philippines, even if we are part of the index as one of the top performing countries in gender equality. So, women's unpaid care work has been recognized as one of the main drivers of inequality, with a direct connection to lower income and physical and mental health stressors. So, the last one is sexual harassment and abuse. And this is something that I've also experienced personally. So, it's really just about not being able to go out at night when you're a woman. And many people claim that you still need protection, and that you cannot wear what you want because you're in danger of being harassed out in the streets. So these are the 3 points that I think are very important that we talk about po.
Micah,
All right.
what are your observations?
So I believe Mayor Sweet and George has already also mentioned some really common among women. But I think just to reinforce what they also said, domestic mentioned by George, there are spike of those reports. There in the university with reports domestic. What has been most problem here has been the access to mental health care that could cater to men. So here in our locality, there is really count the professionals like mental health professionals cater to these individuals. So we have been trying our best to reinforce like and testing division, for example, to help these students they need. But we the core once our students or like women who need support, mental health. They are seeking, example, it's inaccessible really to the public. First, it's very it's really only a few could access these services. But secondly, because of the or like the very few professionals here, yung schedule, not everyone can, not everyone can therapy sessions, for example. The core that has been one of the biggest problems in our city, and we're just really trying our best to still provide access to like diversity guidance and aid, for example. But the biggest problem is really how to help those these kinds of domestic abuse.
Thank you, Micah. I'll call on Steph, but Micah, I'm just concerned because you do come in choppy. I don't know if it's just me, but I wonder maybe later we can try if you turn off your video, we might be able to hear you better. Sayang naman, the points you're making. Okay, Steph, your turn.
So in my case, I believe that some of the things that the women are facing today would be the widening of gender pay gap, where before pandemic it is there beforehand, where the gender pay gap giving women a little bit less, given that they have the same amount of workload with men. And I would like to stress about that women who step out from the workforce since the pandemic has reduced work hours and have trouble getting back on their careers because they are women. That is the stigma that we are still facing since then until today. But the thing is, it is lessening day by day as women step out of their comfort zones.
All right. I think I'm sorry, Trina, do you want to add to what has been pointed out, the domestic violence, the problems in at work, and the increase of unpaid work?
I just want to
What
say
else?
I agree with everything that they said before me, and all of that I think boils down to still the unequal perception of men versus women. So I think these are symptoms of the underlying problem, which is that there is that inequality. So more programs should be and more endeavors should be carried out to address that. So, for example, for Women's Month, a lot of the activities just involve women. So what we've been trying to do is really to involve men as well, because more often than not, they are the perpetrators.
Yes.
So we have come up with a men's organization against violence against women. Also, male barangay officials are educated on women's rights, and etc. So that's something that I just wanted to share, that we have to look at the root of the problem.
Thank you. Carmi, are you around?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you have anything to say at this point? I don't see you.
Actually, I was fixing my camera. I don't know what happened, but I would just like to give emphasis on what my fellow speakers have said, that women during the pandemic have experienced sexual violence. I would like to be empathetic with that because I have also experienced that at a young age, even before during pandemic. So I feel for them, and I feel for the speaker who have also said that. So during pandemic, actually, because we have nothing to do and children are always playing with older men, I believe. No, so mas tumaas actually here in Mindanao, mas tumaas yung violence against women and children, specifically because dito po kasi sa amin masyado pong maraming cases, and we are actually malapit doon sa mga people na people na hindi na kailangan sabihin pero alam na po siguro nating lahat. So I feel for them, and I believe na during pandemic, sana ito po yung mas natutukan sana no na ating mga LGU, and props to our two mayors. So thank you for bringing that issues to the forefront of this activity po.
So it seems the observation has been made, and this is not just in the Philippines but globally, that COVID-19 has exacerbated existing inequalities. Those inequalities existed before, but with COVID-19, they have been the differences, the discrepancies between men and women have further widened, and basically the inequalities were exacerbated. Now, let me ask you then, since this is the political season, do you think these issues that you just raised are getting the proper attention from political candidates, from those running for office? Do they bring up women's issues, or is this unusual? Do they have platforms that address women's issues? Yes, Trina.
I think it's more the exception rather than the rule.
Yes, exactly.
There is no, I think it's very rare that you find that candidates will address that, although there are some that already have programs targeted towards specific groups like women. So of course, like VP Lenny and Angat Buhay and other programs. And I think you'll find that the tendency is that women candidates or women politicians would tend to give
More
more
attention.
attention to address issues like that. So, or maybe I'm biased, I don't know.
Sweet, come on. What do you think?
Yeah. I have to agree with Mayor Trina that women leaders who are in the position right now are into that, to giving solutions to the existing problems in terms of like issues for women and youth. But as we can see that in this political world that we have right now, it's mainly male dominated. We can see that we have God, kasi kailangan namin na we need to have our God budget and our God program. But we don't really know if those programs are really, it's really the right interventions or programs na kailangan talaga ng mga existing issues and challenges with the women right now. Kasi parang nagiging compliant na lang sila. So, but with women, I don't know, the same thing as what Mayor Tina said, hindi kami biased, but those who are women in the position, we are giving really weight on that. Kasi alam namin kung ano yung mga pinagdaanan na the challenges that our women and our youth right now are going through.
Thank you, Micah. I hope we hear you better now.
Yeah,
Okay.
I hope I'm just audible lang po. Okay lang. I'll just continue. So, I really do appreciate Mayor Sweet and really bringing these kinds of like the women agenda into municipalities and cities, because I just like to share an observation. Really, the discussion on women in politics, women empowerment in general, as an observation here, larger, higher positions or in the higher, what you call this, in the higher race, like the senatorial discussions or presidential race, but the lower positions, it becomes fainter. Like the discussion politics becomes and quiet as it trickles lower positions. So that's an observation that we've noticed, example, in our localities in Negros, for example. And I do hope that we can start a larger or like a louder discourse of women in politics, even in communities. So I really do send my appreciation to Mayor Sweet and Mayor so doing it their own local. That's something to work on in Negros, for example, or in the Visayas.
Okay, so we've established that basically a woman's agenda or these issues of women being raised by politicians is more the exception rather than the rule. And when they are raised, they tend to be the women politicians who do this, right? Who have a women's agenda. George, did you have your hand up on these
Yeah.
issues?
Yes, po.
Okay.
I'd like to agree with what has been said. I actually had a conversation with fellow student leaders who are women also in this issue, and we were talking about what kind of issues are usually put forward by candidates now now that we're having the national elections, and um, it was brought up that the platforms and the priorities of candidates tend to change, so it's important that it's really in the law na we create systems or structures that are centered towards really important issues, so that even if our leaders change, the priorities will not, and the marginalized sectors will still have the attention that they need. The actions, there will still be actions that are catered towards helping them live quality life.
Thank you. By the way, I just want to tell the audience that you can write your questions in the chat box. Um, we will be looking through the chat box and then opening the floor to questions after this first round. Okay, so basically, let's go directly now to women in politics. And you've mentioned this in your life stories. No? Do you think there is a bias against women in politics? And what are the barriers to women effectively participating in politics?
Yeah,
Ma'am
I'd like
Tati,
to
yeah, I
okay.
think George and Stephanie are raising their hands.
Yeah. So if we're talking about barriers po that we experience women in politics, I think it's important to stress that if we truly have equality now in the sector, the world of politics, we'd have more vice presidents and presidents who are women. So other countries, I think they have a better ratio of women and men and women leaders, but not here in our country. And I think one of the barriers is the culture talaga of the Filipino people. So I experience men telling me na they want to protect me, or I do not have what it takes to fix the broken system of politics in the Philippines. And as a young leader, syempre very progressive pa ako, and I really want to be able to help out. Very mataas pa yung energy and motivation ko in wanting to fix these problems. And I have men telling me na you're too weak to play the game of politics. And I think that's one of the difficulties that I also experience. Even if I am in an environment where there are women leaders and women elect and people elect women leaders, it's still it's still a subtle issue that we still get to experience, not only in the university setting, but in the national setting as well.
Trina, did you want to say something on this?
I think Steph first before me.
Oh yeah, Steph, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Okay, I think there is a bias against women in politics so gender norms undercut women's positions in politics, fueling the opposition of the female political leadership. So the discriminatory of how people vote and how women should spend their time and behave, imposing in this practical limits on their participation in this politics. But I am here to tell you that I want to choose to have an effect or change by showing up, by being the first and being the domino. By being the domino, I mean, for me, is doing the things that are really difficult with the hope that others will follow suit. Or yeah. So women today feel that we have to take charge because there are too few people here in the world that willing to be the domino. So too few people that are willing to take that fall. I realized that the fear has a concrete power keeping us from doing and saying the things that are part of our purpose. So I'm telling all of these people here today, let us not let fear dictate what we do. Choose to take action and have the confidence to speak and act decisively.
Be
That
the
would be all, I
domino.
think.
Okay. Micah, please.
I think Mayor wanted to speak first po.
Okay, Trina.
Yeah, because I have to go in a bit.
Yeah.
I really experienced so much in the past few years. Parang ganun din, people telling me that I'm too weak, that women are too weak to be good leaders. And then again, the intersectionality of youth and gender. So then, yeah, so a lot of
Bata ka pa.
discouraging stuff. And then people tend to kind of they tend to be very marites, di ba? So, oh, ba't ganyan suot mo? Parang di ka mayor. Oh, you're gaining weight. Things that people feel are right to
Would
say,
never do for a
you
man.
would
They would
never do
never
to
tell that to a man.
male leaders, right? And one time, one opponent even put out fake tabloids about my personal life and all these things. So
Oh
these
my.
are things that can happen, and really, you just have to be so fantastic that people can overlook your gender. So you just have
It's
to
a
keep
shock.
doing what you're doing. Just work doubly hard, and you can also turn it on its head. Na parang, di ba, if the stereotype of women is weak maybe, but also caring, nurturing, all that. So then you show them that your governance and your administration can be very inclusive, can address the needs of people, right? So once you show that, then I think the issue of gender becomes less palpable. It's still there, sure, but it's overshadowed by all the things that you're able to do. So let's just keep doing it.
Micah?
Hello, I hope I'm still audible po. Just to support everyone's point, I think George mentioned this earlier that the in culture, and I'd like to that culture manifested tangible manifestations institutions. So for example, if you have lead, for example, the narrative has always been for leaders to be or stern or never heard high for nurturing qualities like qualities that I think Mayor Sweet mentioned are to women. See those kinds of being highlighted in even among the youth. And I'd like to establish then, for example, in our educational curriculums, we don't have topics that really highlight empowerment or gender or I do not highlight the situation gender gap between men and women LGBT community. So these kinds of manifest or institutions like the education or even empowerment movement as well or yeah should have drastic changes also to be affected or to so yeah.
No, so let me ask you, if you're trying to think of how to change that system. From your experience, what support, what were your sources of support that got you where you are? I mean, you're all very young yet, but you've accomplished quite a bit. Just get elected, presidents of your student bodies in co-educational institutions, to be mayor of your towns at such a young age. So what were your support systems? And maybe we can learn from that.
Okay, go ahead. So yeah, go
Yes,
ahead.
please. Sweet.
I know when we talk about passion or purpose, we always say that it's just in the book, but actually, that is something that fuels me because like what I said earlier, before I became a mayor, I've been a volunteer, I've been a community worker, and then when I was given the chance to sit in the position, I was able to expand my network, and this way, the support that I am getting, that's the reason that why I continue to do my job, even though it's tiring, even though it's very hard to balance between your family and the bigger family, which is your community. It's because when you see young leaders or young men, women are telling you that you are an inspiration to them, that you've done something right. And the women that you've worked with that says thank you to you, thank you for doing this. And those words, these comforting words, and the change that you see in them, yung mga ginagawa nila in the little wins that they do in their community, it's very inspiring. And with that, that's just the support that keeps me going, other than the family that I have.
But yeah, but I'm interested in that too. The family, do they in general support uh, women who are active in politics, or do they fear for them and try to be protective, as George was saying earlier? They mean well, but in a sense, it is also keeping you from doing what you can do. Some reflections on the social environment, in a sense, that you work with every day.
Personally, no, because my husband is from my political family, and so far the things that I'm doing, they've been okay with it. They agreed to that, and I've been giving so much inputs to the family as well. So personally speaking, hindi naman siya naging, yeah. Personally speaking, they're giving me the support that I need.
So family is an important source of support.
Yes.
Yes, George.
Yeah, I'd like to agree with what Mayor Sweet saying about the importance of the support of the family. I think that the notion of how strong women raise strong women. So I think I was very lucky because my mom raised me to not to always be respectful, but know when I'm being disrespected, most especially if it's about my gender. So earlier I said in my introduction speech that I was raised in environments where they looked more at what I did and how well I did it rather than my gender. So I think it's very important to cultivate an environment where other women can experience what I experienced growing up. Because if it were not for those environments and the strong women who raised me, then I think I will not be in this webinar. I will not be president of the university student government, and I will not have the opportunity to speak about the things that matter.
Micah?
So my is contrary, if I may say, to Mayor Sweets and actually my family was very, just to provide context. I hope I'm still audible. Okay lang.
You're a bit choppy, but go ahead.
All right, I'll just
Turn off. Yes, please.
okay. So it was contrary, was very protective of me. Contextualize that he locality, and I will not hide this. There were people position that were really act or was threatened. For example, of them running into. So I guess that's what made them overprotective. The support system that was more of an institutional support. The political parties, university have been very to people gender. So that's the strongest support in the past year.
Thank you. Trina?
I think support systems are very important, especially for us women leaders. So first, there's the family, and then of course, friends. But I want to also advise, especially for our young student leaders here, that you can also create your support system. There are so many
Very good.
fellowships, so many programs. So I was fortunate enough to be part of a program by the Jessie Robredo Foundation. I also joined Angat Bayi, which is a program specifically for women political leaders. And as long as you always grab the chance to be part
That's very good.
programs like that, then you can build communities that support you, because there are a lot of young women leaders who experience the same things that I experienced. That's what I learned from all these programs. So we're able to support each other. We're able to suggest programs to each other. So, you can also join and find communities to help support you.
So that's good. Make your own support systems, in a sense. Yes. Yes, Steph?
Yes, as stated in the beginning of my introduction, that the beginnings are not always easy. I started coming from not knowing at all, and I found mentors along the way. I found friends from the different organizations that teach me work and personal development. And I am proud to say that my family is also very supportive of the endeavors that I am joining to organizations and all. And I would like to give credit also to my beloved institution, Technological Institute of the Philippines, that has always been part of my growth since they have been supporting student leaders like me and providing different opportunities for growth and academic development and as well as leadership development. And I would like to say that and proud that they are my support system. And as I can see in the participants, there are a lot of students and admin here coming from TIP supporting me in this Women in Politics talk. Thank you.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And they're very proud of you. And the fact is that, you're in a male field in a sense, no, industrial engineering. So, and you get the support from your school. That's wonderful. So schools are also a very important source of support. I think Michi, Carmi pala, I'm sorry that I can't see you, but anyway, I'm glad. Come on, Carmi, please.
Yes, Ma'am Patricia. I figured that my connectivity is not stable. So
But you
sa
sound very good. In fact, you sound even better than Micah.
sa audio na lang po siguro.
Sige,
So
audio na lang. Sige.
yes po. I would like to support George's statement earlier that you need to have a support system. Actually, I do have a very good support system because I actually grew up in an environment where women leaders are very rampant. Like I have a single mother, no, so she stood as my mother and my father for approximately for 15 years, I think. So are raising 3 children, being a leader, being a teacher, being the man of the house. Actually, leader na po kasi yun. And actually, I saw Dr. Yvonne here, our very first woman student regent here in the university. So hello, Ma'am Yvonne. And
Yeah.
actually, our governor is actually the first SK president here in our province. So babae din po siya, no? So I actually applaud them. I respect their ability so much. All of you actually, to run for offices, to participate in discussions, and advocate for equality in terms of our culture, religion, and of course, our gender. So actually, having a single mom is always a challenge, but for me, being a woman is actually not a challenge at all. It's actually a privilege. It's actually a privilege to be a woman, and I think we owe it to our mothers for who we are today, and we owe it to our soon to be children to believe in them, no, as women. Kasi if you do not have a tight support system, I think that makes being a woman very challenging.
So I like that, the role models, no, because that, as a psychologist, I like the concept of role models very, very much. So models are very important in our society. Sorry. I think we will open open the floor to the chat box. Sorry.
Ma'am Lekwanan, if I may po. Because there might be a scheduled power interruption and I might not be able to participate in the rest of the webinar. But I'd like to just say a quick message lang, especially to the viewers who are members of the sector of the youth. So I once read this book called The Second Sex by philosopher Simone de Beauvoir. And it says there, referring to a woman, that her wings are cut and then she is blamed for not knowing how to fly. I think that it tells of how society has always looked down at women as mere followers, meek, never assertive. And it was a piece of literature that opened my eyes to how far we've come in attaining true equality and how far we still have to go. So every single day, women are still looked down upon for being or appearing as weak. But as I stand here today with women leaders who have shown that gender does not stand in the way of genuine service, it seems that it's society that has it all wrong. So today we are talking about breaking barriers for women in politics, but I do not think that we should just break it. We should ensure that we raise an entire generation that will ensure that it is never put back up. So women leaders in times of crises have never failed to show up, as one of the women leaders here said. And so what we discuss here moving forward allow us to discern properly on who we would want to lead our country, and may our gender never hinder us from seeing what true public service that doesn't count the cost is. So yun lang po. I might get cut off po kasi
I
at
hope
any
not.
time.
I hope not. So I have invited Danny Gonzalez from the Women and Gender Institute of Miriam College to help us monitor the chat box. Are there some interesting questions, Danny? Because we have to give people the chance to ask.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you, Ms. Tati, for having me and Wagi in this very wonderful forum. So yes, we actually have a number of questions in the chat box, although one of which has already been answered. I'd like to read here very quickly. Jalen, Adrian, Rin asked our mayors who do they endorse as a candidate for this election. And both mayors have answered through the chat box as well that they very strongly and happily endorse VP Lenny as their president, despite their own families and members and community not doing so. And Mayor Sweet in particular has been really working on the ground just to introduce VP Lenny and the work that she has done. And now we have another question here. Though people today are slowly being open when it comes to gender equality, it's still undeniable that some will view women inferior to men. How do you combat this kind of attitude? Is being capable enough? Because as I have noticed, some works of women are still being invalidated just because they are women. Do you think active actions and movements are necessary to combat this?
That is so widespread. And really, an actual survey was done around Asia, including the Philippines. And it's very clear that a lot of people still think that women are less capable as political leaders. So what do you think we can do about it? What have you done about it?
Maybe I can start, Dr. Liquanan, but
Sure,
I'd like to clarify if my internet is stable again. It's been very problematic. Okay na siya? Okay. All right. So, to respond to that question, I really do believe that the fight for gender equality is going to be a long one. Like when we witnessed in the past, when we tried to fight for women's vote, for example, and I think that started in the West, in Western countries, but of course it rippled throughout the globe. But it was not an easy task. It was not a task that was finished in just a single year. The fight lasted for decades. And I believe that's the kind of fight that we need to anticipate in terms of now putting women into position. And I believe that fight we should never like weaken our stances. We should never stop participating in this fight. And I'd like to really also share my personal advocacy. I really do believe in the power of education. And I believe that, for example, people in position can dictate, for example, the curriculum that will be followed in our educational systems, starting from kindergarten, elementary, like the basic education, up until higher education. And I believe once we elect individuals into position that can dictate or like will prioritize women empowerment in these educational institutions, in these educational curriculum, we are a step closer to changing the culture and changing the narrative, because that kind of change can only happen. I do believe that kind of change best happens in our educational systems. So that's where my personal advocacy is at. And I do believe that aside from like the educational institutions, the formal ones, I think education can also happen outside our schools. And I think we can start that in our own communities, even in our own households. So yeah, that's where I think the fight for women empowerment and gender equality can really start or even continue, if I may say.
Steph, please.
Yes, ma'am. So as long as the society continues to associate leadership with masculine traits, female leaders will be judged more harshly, even when we outperform male counterparts. And it's no wonder that female leaders suffer greatly as our elections or things we do because and yet women leadership is needed now more than ever. Barriers to women leadership still need to be broken down here and everywhere. And I am proud to say that more women are rising and reaching leadership positions, just like me. And the women speaking with me today are role models. They inspire others to follow the same path, and they motivate girls to be more ambitious and to have to realize their potential, to step up closer to leadership, to other agendas that we women can also participate in.
Thank you, Steph. Oh my God, we're losing our panel. Some are going to rallies, and then I think I think that must be George who must have had the blackout because she said there was a blackout or a brownout coming. More questions, Danny?
Yes, we have more questions here, and they're actually these two next questions are very specific. The first question, and maybe you can answer them at the same time. The first question: what is your stance on men that make laws about women's bodies? So this is a question on your opinion on bodily autonomy, and then the second one, especially for our student leaders and mayors, what do you think about the anti-terror law? Red tagging has been very prevalent during President Duterte's reign, and a lot of civilians have been victims of this. So again, two questions on bodily autonomy and the anti-terror law. If you can share your thoughts.
Anyone?
Maybe I can start again.
Sure, Micah, of course.
So, I do firstly to contextualize this response on the first question. I do recognize that the Philippines is a dominantly Catholic and Christian country. But since this is a question that also asks our personal stances, I'd like to also share how there is a need. I think there really is a need for women to be involved in those kinds in crafting those laws that dictate or at least deal with bodily autonomy. I'd like to really share this with you. For example, I'm a personal advocate of like legalized abortion, and maybe not all of us here in the call will agree to that, and I'm very open to a discussion with that. But for example, when dealing with these kinds of discussions, we need women in position in the Senate, for example, or in Congress that will really voice out both pro and anti-abortion, to really hear out what actually are the thoughts of women regarding these kinds of laws, because it deals with their own body and they have first-hand experience, and the distinct experience of a woman should be heard in these kinds of political platforms. So I believe that's why it's crucial to put women into position, because once laws like these are starting to be discussed, it's crucial that the distinct experience of women are also heard, whether it be pro or against these kinds of laws. So that's why I believe it's crucial for us to choose leaders that will really represent our interests. As to the anti-terror, to the terror law, for example, my organization that I'm still affiliated with, the Debate Society, is very much against. We've been very vocal against the terror law, primarily because of how our seniors and we have discussions of some legal loopholes that are inside the law itself. So I believe that those kinds of legal loopholes should be addressed first. So I think included in these, and this was really discussed in as early as 2020 already, how a person just suspected of terrorism. So when you are suspected, you can just be an activist voicing out your opinion, but you're already a suspect of terrorism. You can already be arrested, for example, and taken into custody by the police, for example. So those kinds of loopholes that were identified should be thoroughly discussed before we can actually pass this kind of law. So that's from my end, and that personally reflects my individual opinion. Some of the constituents in the SUSG also have different opinions regarding it. So I'd like to provide that disclaimer as well. So that's from my end.
Steph, please.
Yes, ma'am. So, in my opinion about the bodily autonomy, I believe that women should be more vocal about it, more vocal about their thoughts and opinions about it before lawmakers create the law is that is more aligned with the majority of people, because we need to have consensus or the data before coming up with a decision, knowing that women leaders are multidimensional. I mean, they look at the different aspects before coming into decisions. Maybe we could tap on the empathy that these babies that will come out, or this abortion thing, or because it is life and future, so we cannot decide it on in there on from there on. We need to have more information before coming up into the decision. So I think we need more women to speak out about it. Then we will create a movement. Then before we decide what is the most possible or the greatest action to do, or greatest or what is best for that particular topic. So for the anti-terror law, my thoughts would be here that since it is part of protecting life, property, and terrorism, I believe that women leaders should be taken part of it, or be part of the decision making, because again, as I said, that women leaders are holistic leaders. We tend to look at different aspect, different point of views before coming into decision. We should touch point more on the emotional side or the empathetical aspect of decision making, because I believe that the anti-terrorism law is only one-sided, and it governs the part of the law good for the security of the Philippines. Ayun. So that
Well,
would be my thoughts regarding those two topics given by the
actually, it would be interesting because the anti-terror law, I haven't heard that it has particular gender dimensions. Actually, it's something that I think all of us, both male and female, should fight against. But anyway, as I said, really disappointed that so many have been affected by connectivity issues and the political rallies that they have to go to. So Mayor Sweet has to leave as well. But I'm sorry we didn't get Trina to make her final statement, because we wanted to ask, my final point, I wanted each of you to reflect and give advice to young people today about the 2022 elections. So Sweet, you start because you're leaving.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Liquanan, and it's a pleasure to hear all the speakers here on today's forum. Just to add also to that anti-terror bill, I've spoke to many military people and the police officials, and pretty much you're right, Stephanie. It's a one-sided bill. So I've also been working with marginalized sector. I have advocacy also that I go to far-flung communities, and usually when I do outreach like that, I have to be accompanied with men in uniform just to prevent myself from red tagging. There are positive side that the men in uniform are talking that is in favor for them. But at the same time, it really depends on the agency or the government on how they will implement it. So it matters really to this the military or the Philippine National Police. So far, these are the agencies that are implementing the law on how they will implement it. Because this time we see many abuses. We heard so many bad things they've been abusing this law because of this anti-terror law. There are some positive side of that law, but again, we also have to look into that. we have to check on it further just to protect human rights. And for my parting statement, I asked Dr. Liquanan, I'll be leaving now. So I really want, because this is the forum that is all about, it's encouraging women and youth to exercise their rights, to vote, to choose the right leader, especially for this coming election. Last 2019, we have about, I think it's 60%, 50 to 60%. Our young voters are about more than half of the voting population in the Philippines. So we can really make that change. We can really choose that someone who can craft laws and programs that is in favor for us. After all, this is our future that we are talking about. I mean, I am a little bit older, but I still consider myself young, and I am working for the youth. So it's very important. Education is one. It is a really long battle that we have to fight. But we have young leaders here. We have different women leaders who are speaking here, who are very empowered, very opinionated, and they're very hungry for change. And we all want that for our country. And this time, with this much percentage of voting population, with more than 50%, we can really educate our fellow youth. We can tell them the programs. We have limited time right now, and social media plays a big role in changing people's mindset. And the platform, the social media platform, we can use this to influence other people, other youth, to choose the right candidates for them. And again, it's rare right now to have people they prefer to read fake news. They prefer to share memes. Most of the people they hate to read facts, and there are so many disinformation coming in our social media platforms. Sabi nga nila, we have a war going on right now. It's not just the war in Ukraine or Russia. It's the war that we have to be worried about is the war in our social media, in the cyber world. Kasi this is where we disseminate information, this is where we educate people, and malaki siyang bagay. So it is really a role kami na nakaupo, nasa position right now, and for the young leaders as well, to encourage the young people, the youth, to vote and to educate them who are the right people that should be in the position. Kasi we're not just talking here of 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. It's about 6 years of our, country's future, your future that we are talking about. So let's go out and let's vote. And for all the women leaders, congratulations to our young leaders. You are doing well. And thank you very much, Dr. Liquanan, for inviting me and to share my leadership journey.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sweet, and good luck to you. You're running yourself, right? For re-election.
Yes, I am re-electionist for my 3rd term.
Good luck.
Thank you po.
Okay. I wonder if, since, as I said, we're losing our panel, is there anyone in the audience who would like to express their opinions on some of these matters that we have raised? Thank you, Doctor. Thank you, Mayor Sweet. Bye-bye. Did we lose Carmi as well? We did.
Yeah.
And also George.
Yeah.
Danny, can we get you back in here? Are there people from the who are dying to say something from the audience? Maybe we would welcome opinions if you're willing to speak out, rather. But of course, you're welcome to use the chat box.
We also have some insights in the chat box from
Yes,
Ms.
please.
Dora Bukoy. Generation equality is palpable in this forum. Very inspiring how you young leaders in the schools and in the LGUs are exemplars of courage, competence, and caring leadership. Mabuhay kayo, RM Bukoy. And then lots of thanks. And then I have another question here po. So there's been a lot of talk, especially when we were answering the questions on bodily autonomy and the anti-terror law. There was a lot of talk about having women in these political spaces. And now, as we know, it's it's important to have women in these political spaces, but it's important to have the right women in these
Right.
political spaces. So can you tell us about what for you is the right woman in these political spaces?
So it's not sufficient to just be a woman, to
Yes.
be concerned about women's issues and to raise the right issues in governance, but you have to have the right woman. So anything you'd like to say about that, please?
Maybe I can start again, Dr.
Surely.
So, kasi we're talking about women in politics and really representing the voice of women in politics. I believe for me, the right women to be placed into this position is someone that actually values their distinct experience. And I really always highlight that term, distinct experience, because, and this is not to hate or to attack, but I feel like there are women out there as well that also have other priorities, whose advocacies are also aligned with a different field, for example. So when we're trying to elect individuals into these positions, it's important that their message is clear to us. So if we want these women in position to also represent our voice as women, then it should be made clear to us that that's one of their priority in their platforms, that's one of their priorities in their track records, of the engagements that they have had, the experiences that they have had, is really with other women in the different sectors, in different communities as well. Because I believe that kind of experience or that kind of exposure is what they will be bringing into those political platforms when they're debating in Senate, in Congress, for example. So that's, for me, the ideal women that for the lack of a better term, ideal women, but I hate using that term as well. But that's the kind of woman that I want, I see to be in those positions. That those that have really committed their entire lives for women empowerment. Because some women out there also have their own advocacies. Some advocate for the environment, some advocate for their own religions, for example, and that's equally okay. But for those people that want to be in these political positions, then and for them to represent our voice, it's important that their entire track record, their entire lives have been
Right.
really they've been committed to women empowerment.
So they're really women for women.
Yes, exactly, doctor. Exactly.
So Steph, please.
Yes. So for me, the ideal woman that we wanted to be is the woman that shows up, because the woman that shows up is one of the greatest contribution that women can give, because she is presenting that she is a leader herself. Because if you lead people, you have the responsibility to be a leader or to lead by example, and have the ultimate power to motivate people and motivate others to be successful or to be in line with right values and right things. So simply, the answer to that question would be, as a leader, I will do what I love and I need as a leader. In whatever I do it with my best efforts. Work with all your heart and take pride with what you do, leaders and people here. So work with all your heart and take pride in what you do. Trust me, it is always the right way forward.
You know, earlier, thank you, Steph. Earlier, I think it was you, Micah, who mentioned a woman's vote. Let's talk about that. Is there I think clearly there's no such thing yet as a woman's vote, but is that something that you think we would like to aspire for? Well, a woman's vote has been defined in many ways. Our group in Women 2022 has defined it as, first of all, women voting, which they already do. No, more women vote than men. There are more women registered than men. Voting for women, and as you put it, the right woman, but also voting for candidates who support a woman's agenda. And in addition to this, that vote, that women's vote, makes a difference. That basically how women vote will determine the outcome of an election. That's what we are aspiring for. So what are your thoughts on a woman's vote? Yes, Steph.
So with that question, I believe there is a larger impact of what this election symbolizes. Because yes, Women's suffrage is about feminism, but feminism is about fairness. Suffrage is not simply the right to vote, but it is also what it represents, the basic and fundamental right of being able to participate in the choices of our future, of my future, your future, and our country. So I believe that the involvement and voice that we are creating today allows us to be part of the change that we want to see in the world.
Micah? Thank
Um,
you, Steph.
Thank you for that, Steph, as well. It's very inspiring really to hear from everyone. I do really believe that a women's vote is crucial. But to add on to that, Dr. Patricia, I feel like the narrative on women's vote should really be, for the lack of a better term, like should be framed or should be painted in a way that would really be relatable to the daily woman or to even to men who have women in their lives. So for example, kasi sometimes the narrative of I don't know, some people say na they're just talking about, identity. They're just talking about gender. They're talking about like metaphysical concepts that cannot be touched on. But I feel like the narrative should really be shifted to something more tangible, something close to your heart. So the discussion on women's vote should include platforms, for example, that really prioritize maternity leave, and it should really be discussed in a way na relatable to the public. So, for example, um, it should be discussed in a way where if you're a husband or if you're a son or a daughter, for example, you need to look at your own mom. If they're pregnant, would you want for them to be stressed? Shouldn't they be afford rest so that they can take care of your for future younger siblings, something like that. So I feel like the discussion should be brought down from really highly for the lack of a better term, academic concepts to concepts that are relatable to the daily living. So aside from maternity leave, you have pay, like it should be discussed na are you okay na yung mama mo maliit yung makukuhang sahod, something like that. So the discussion should be more relatable. And I feel like that also represents a woman's vote, not just us, casting our ballot, but also seeing those kinds of plans in platforms of our leaders, regardless of gender. I think there are men that also
Yes,
forward.
exactly.
Yeah, there are men
Sure.
forward these platforms, but I feel like it should be more relatable para it becomes a priority. It becomes one of the highlights of our government or as the Filipino community. So that's what I think po.
So yes, of course, I think a man who supports the woman's agenda deserves our vote, right? It deserves the woman's vote. Yes. Any more things from the chat box, Danny, please?
Yes, we have another question and two very beautiful insights. So from Maria Luz Vilches, I just want to say how wonderful to hear young women leaders who are steadfast and faithful to their calling. You need to hold up half the sky for all of us. And then another insight from Catherine Vistra Yu. I hope none of you fall into the trap of thinking that you are indispensable. I hope as well that you're all working on identifying and mentoring your prospective successors. Yeah. And then we have a question here from Martha Marie Makatangay. And I have another question I want to tie with that. That maybe you can answer. So her question is, because of the struggles you experienced as a woman in your field, was there a time when you wished you were a man? And parang nakabit nun in the work that you've done and in your leadership journey, what is something that you would have done differently?
Very interesting. Okay. Anyone want to tackle that?
Maybe I can share as well, everyone. This really hits home because I actually wrote a poem one of my lowest points as a leader, where I wrote at the end of that poem na, oh, how great would it be to be a man adored by a woman like me. And to
Oh,
contextualize,
wow.
but to contextualize,
Nice.
much of the poem really highlighted how, to be honest, men have it so much easier. Like they really have it so much easier. They have, for example, in the meetings that I've attended, a man has a bigger voice, a deeper voice. something that catches the attention immediately of the public. Sometimes my own voice as a woman is discriminated against because it's too high pitched, it's noisy to listen to. That has been one of the most basic struggle. But secondly, I have to dress up more. I take up more time to prepare and present myself for meetings. My appearance is commented on more than to a man. So one of those things has been one of the biggest struggles, like the daily things that I need to catch up on that men don't have to do. And that's when, during those low points, I thought, ang dali maging lalaki. I apologize for the men here. Sometimes that was just a product of my frustration, but that was why I thought, sometimes the privileges that the patriarchy provides to a man is something na parang is worth being like envious of. And what you call, ano po yung second question again, Miss Danny?
In your leadership journey, what is something that you would have done differently?
Okay. So I guess in my leadership journey, the entire journey for so far in the year, I really did wish I had a stronger voice. I did wish that I just swallowed my fears sometimes, especially in local issues. So I'd like to share in the locality in Dumaguete City, it has been a non-ending fight to go against the 174-hectare reclamation project that harms the marine area here in Dumaguete. And it's been an entire year and the struggle hasn't ended yet. And there were times where I really wished I spoke up more in discussions. I just wish that I swallowed my fear. I swallowed, the inhibitions that I had. And I feel like, that I think that applies to everyone, really, the fears that we have. And sometimes this is what I heard from a mentor of mine. Sometimes you just really have to do it scared. Like, we have to do it with our fears, but in the end of the day, we'll still persevere anyway. So that's my experience personally.
Stephanie?
So in my own experience, the difficulties that I face as a woman leader would be I am not seen as a strong and capable leader, doubting my leadership qualities because I am a woman. There is this notion that a lot of people don't trust women to lead effectively. These are biases. These are biases that are deeply seated and may be difficult to change. But as time goes by, as women step out of their comfort zones, we are proving to them that we women can too lead. So women are penalized and we behave ways that violate the gender norms. So our gender stereotypes as women should be kind, nurturing, helpful, as stated by Micah. Then we have supportive, and then the men are expected to be decisive, competent, assertive, and strong. So it is super hard, or we need women to be extra, to do extra, just to say that we deserve, we belong here, we have a stand here. So I think in my leadership journey, I think I don't think that I need to improve something in myself or in my leadership throughout my leadership journey, because to me, we should look on the brighter side. We shouldn't see the conflicts or the problems that we face in our leadership journey or through life as a negative thing. Instead, we should see it as a strength to do good, to be better in order to solve it. So additionally, I am an industrial engineer, so in a future industrial engineer. So engineering is a male-dominated profession, but as you can see, I am here, future industrial engineer, leading my community, representing the TIP community as a woman leader. So I think that we are already breaking the bias just by representing or showing up to people. So again, I will go to the conflicts. So conflicts are always, always, always complicated. But without it, I believe success won't happen. And I won't go far from being not knowing anything about the organization, but going to PII NSC as ambassador, and now here talking to and representing women in politics. That would be all.
Can I ask this question of both of you? Do you think you are going into politics I think we lost George and Carmi. I believe George sounded as if she has really plans of going into politics. But what about you, Steph and Micah? Have you thought about it? And is it a serious consideration? And what are the factors that you are weighing? Micah, you sound like, you know, you're a future politician.
Maybe
Wait,
Steph
okay, sorry,
first.
Steph, yeah, go ahead.
So I will answer the question first. So as an I will just give first a brief background about industrial engineering. So industrial engineer basically leads people or manages people, time, machines, and all. So basically, we are leaders in the company. In companies, we are deployed in different areas, in hospitals, in companies, in all other aspects. Even though I would not proceed to politics, but I believe I will be a leader in my own way in my future profession as an industrial engineer. So I believe that even women or me, I will not go to politics, but we are still embodying the leadership as women, breaking in the bias into different organizations that we are pursuing or going into. And I believe George is pursuing legal management, so maybe she would be a future lawyer or politician someday. And I'm proud to be one of the women leaders speaking in here today.
Thank you. Micah, what about you?
Yeah. To explicitly express it, it's part of the plan, Dr. Liquanan.
Oh, okay.
Part of the plan. I think
That's good.
similarly to George, who plans to proceed to law, I also have the same plan. But and I'd like to share, I'd like this to be the starter of one of the points I wanted to share. If you've noticed, women in politics, in the Philippine context specifically, have always been affiliated with men. If you've noticed, for
Right.
example,
Yeah, that's
historically,
true.
President Cory Aquino was the husband of Ninoy.
The wife,
Even
yeah.
it was the wife. I mean, was the wife. But even now, for example, our leading candidates, VP Robredo, though I think the vice president was able to establish herself as a vice president, started off affiliated to the late husband. Even the vice presidential Sara Duterte established herself as a mayor, but is still affiliated to the incumbent president. But even in your localities, I'm very certain that the women in politics may have always been affiliated to a man previously in power. And I hope that kind of narrative we can start to change to really supporting, and this is me again expressing my personal opinion and advocacy, really is supporting or going against political dynasties. And I really do hope you share this sentiment with me because I think those are rampant,
Yeah,
especially
exactly.
local politics. Like in local politics, I think it's more rampant. And that's one of the factors I'm weighing down right now, Dr. Liquanan, on maybe I don't need to go into politics. Maybe I can serve in a different field because I don't come from a political family, and my locality has, like, even the entire province. The dynasties have a very strong hold, so it might be difficult for me to enter. But the ideals, the hopes are still there. You know, by the grace of God, maybe we'll reach it.
Yeah, but I think that's a very important point. I'm glad you raised it because political dynasties is really an issue here. So basically, then, how would someone who does not belong to a political family um, prosper in a career or prosper in their aspirations to be a politician? And any thoughts on that? Certainly, either of you, please. You don't have to be from a political family. We have to break that stereotype.
Yeah,
But that's because of support systems. See, that's because if you belong to a dynasty, you have some of the natural support systems, you know. But we have to build those support systems if we want to break into this exclusive fraternity or whatever. Yes, Steph, please.
Yes, I just would like to share that support system that you have stated earlier because my leadership journey is not other people saw my potential first because as I become the ambassador for the previous organization that I have stated in my introduction, people started coming to me that they too wanted to be part of the political party that I should run as a president for them to lead. So I believe that the magnitude of my actions really has this power that made me who I am today. If they wouldn't believe in me that particular time, I wouldn't be much confident in myself leading people. So I believe a strong support system can really go a long way.
To
Yes,
share as well,
Micah.
Dr.
Okay.
Patricia. It was very nice, the insight of Mayor Sheena, I think, earlier when she said you form your support systems as well.
Yes, exactly. That's
Yeah,
very important message.
it's very nice because when you form your support systems, you identify, for example, a common goal or a common advocacy that will bind you, your support system, and to share this to the political dynasty discussion, and to contextualize my sharing in our locality, the hold of politics have always been of the families that have Spaniard descent. So they, in our local language, it's called Kachela, Katsila. So they have been dominating politics, and I believe it's going to be hard, but I think it's a worthy fight for those outside of these dynasties, those lumads that really come from Negros, for example, to form a support system and hopefully form a formal political party that will really, claim the identity of Filipinos and a change of governance. So I feel like that's one of the tangible steps that can be made, hopefully, in the near future in our local governance, even in other communities.
I hope so. Thank you, Micah. Danny, you had your hand raised.
Yes, but we have a number of insights and another
Yes,
question
please.
actually in the chat box that I think are worth reading. So from Jalan Adrian Rin, I think po there's an opportunity to deal with gender discrimination through education, particularly in history. I observe po kasi that the role of women in our country's history is obscured. If you ask people to name a historical woman, for lack of a better term, in our country, the names they give are probably Tandang Sora and Gabriela Silang, but there are also Dayang Kalimitan, Dayang Sasaban, Dayang Urduha, and countless others. I think po kasi parang puro lalaki yung na-emphasize in the history books. I wanted to ask this of our mayors to advocate for that change in our narrative in history. Unfortunately, they're not here, but we're reading it out now, Jalen. So maybe our young women leaders here, and the session is recorded, so hopefully the message will go to our mayors as well. And then from Ms. Olive Tripon, proud of the panel of strong women leaders, continue to show up and speak up, and a number of thanks and congratulations as well. And then we have two questions from attorney Carmelita Sison. Congrats to all the brave and articulate speakers. What can you say about a president who advocates and even signs into law the Safe Spaces Act for women, and yet acts and exhibits disturbing behavior that is the complete antithesis of the very essence of said law?
Are you going to ask the second question, or shall we ask them to answer this one first?
Sige po. Let me just check the other question just came in. All right, I think you can answer then the second question. Maybe pagtikitin nyo na lang po when you answer it. So another question that was anonymously sent, so I'm gonna keep the person anonymous. I'm just curious, since we women may sometimes think that men had it easier since they somehow had advantages in politics, what do you think about the insights of some men that women actually had it easier since they think that women don't need to work hard because all we need to do is present ourselves beautifully and presentably?
That's the same stereotype, right?
What are your insights regarding their thoughts and comments? So,
okay.
I'll try to go first.
Sure.
Regarding the first question with attorney Season, that's why I guess firstly I really love how Stephanie explains the domino effect. Like you set by example, and I think I've also mentioned earlier I was looking for a woman to be in politics, they should be a woman with a track record that is devoted for women, like a woman for women. And I think that should be applicable as well to other leaders. That means they can't just put their signature, and that doesn't mean the signature is an attestation of their support. I think a leader is also a leader that should lead by example, like their entire life, their entire lifestyle, their entire the way they bring themselves in is an attestation of their leadership. So to what my opinion is, I believe the president could have done better, or I feel like the president could change. The president, should embody whatever is being placed in the Safe Spaces Act for Women. And I believe should the actions, I think is of course the elections is coming up, but of course siya pa rin yung incumbent. Should actions really escalate to the point where it's harmful for women, then the same laws to penalize such actions should be applied to the president or to whoever is in position. Like, just because these people supported the Safe Spaces Act, but that doesn't mean they are free from whatever penalty is there should they, go against it, or should they also exhibit actions that, what do you call this, endanger women, for example. So that's my opinion regarding this matter. And I think the second question was regarding men telling us that we have it easier. My immediate response to that is really an eye roll, because that's never the case. And I guess the what I always say will really just every time I hear that no, it's never easier. Trying to prove ourselves have always required twice the energy and twice the effort. And you just give them all the examples that have happened in the past. And I hope that shuts them up. So that's from my end regarding those two questions.
That's another male put down. That's their way of putting us down too, saying that we have it easier. Steph, please.
So again, for the Safe Spaces Act that attorney mentioned or raised for this question, I believe that the president should be the first one who participates in that kind of campaign, because we follow what we saw. So parang what you see is what you follow, diba? Like the child, a small child following his mother or father. So like a child, we are following our leaders. So we follow what we see. So we need leaders that gives us good example or presents us good example and following through their words and actions, not just words only. So just like the domino effect that I have stated earlier, the people, men and women, should take charge of following through their words and actions through being present, through creating programs, or simply advocating for it. So I believe the next question would be the women is easier by presenting themselves only. So I think that is not the case, because as stated in the previous discussions or the previous Q&A sessions, we have really emphasized that women are discriminated by how we should act and feel, and that we need to put in extra more effort. But I believe as a woman, we are strong. The women are, I see women as strength that we as women can show our positivity amidst those backlash that we are given to. I always believe that everything will work out, that this will give the drive for women leaders in our society, the drive to carry on living and to carry out on their passion with leadership. And I would like to refuse negativity to bring myself and other women down by thinking of negative thoughts. So I believe that positive energy, or following through your leadership, your passion, your purpose is a choice. And I have that enthusiasm for this choice to be present in my daily life.
Okay, very, very good. I think basically, my AirPods have run out of charge, so that means we've gone the full almost over 2 hours. It's a pity, as I said, that the others have left, but I would like to ask the two young women student leaders here, if you, it was mentioned that the youth is the largest voting bloc now, and what is your message to them this 2022 elections? What can you tell them? What can you ask of them? What can you urge them to do in order to make our country better? What is your parting message to your peers, to other young people? Steph?
Okay, my parting message to everyone present here, or the people that will be listening to this Women in Politics. There are a lot of problems here in the world. So it is both physical and digital world. So there is a lot going on. So we must do everything that we can ensure that women voices and men voices are heard. Because at this juncture, if we aren't part of the solution, we are part of the problem. So we should exercise our right to vote. I would frame it as we vote to honor those who came before us and protect those who will come after us, because that is what community is all about. Specifically, election is all about. So we are 41 days away from the election day, so it is close, yet there is so much work needed to be done in a small amount of time that we have. So choose to be out there, mobilizing our voices to be heard. And I encourage you all to vote for this upcoming elections.
Thank you, Stephanie. Micah, your parting message to your peers, to other young people.
So to the young people in this call right now, I hope it allow me to use colloquial language, and I just hope we never shut up. People might tell us online or even in our own families or communities that we're being too noisy, we're being too like we're joining too many things, we're being too loud. Don't let that shut you up. It's crucial for our voices to be heard in whatever platforms we have. So if you're online and you see fake news, don't be afraid to call them out. Of course, in a very polite and respectful manner, to provide the most accurate news possible, to really be vigilant with all the injustices that are happening leading up to the May 9 elections. But also, I do hope we don't shut up after elections, because I'd like to believe the political process and the political engagement does not stop after elections. I think that's just the start of it. Whoever is elected into these positions should be held accountable to us, people who they should be serving. So I do hope after the elections we never also stop voicing out. Let's not shut up. Let's really voice out whatever wrong things, or if they don't uphold the platforms that they have presented, then let's not be scared to call them out on it on whatever platforms that we have. And lastly, I do hope, as a personal advocacy, I encourage everyone to really actually enter the public sector. By that I mean, I do hope we're looking forward into maybe not running into position, but going into our respective LGUs, going into the government sector where the crucial decisions are needed, because I do believe the most enlightened and critical population or demographic right now is the youth. And that's what the government needs. And that's a personal advocacy of mine to encourage everyone, whether, for example, if it's Stephanie and the engineers that you are with in your classes, maybe they're interested to go into their own respective LGUs and in your own respective careers. I really do hope they are all in line towards nation building. So, political engagement and the fight continues. And we hope to our hearts we remind ourselves to never shut up. Thank you so much, Dr. Likana, and to everyone in this call for this opportunity.
Okay, so it is too bad we didn't hear the parting messages of everybody, but I do have a message to the six of you, at least those who were here, the four students and the two amazing young women mayors, that basically, political leadership is your right, don't shy away from it. But aside from being a right, it is also a duty and your contribution to building our nation. So I hope that more young people like yourselves get involved in this 2022 elections. And I'm not saying just go out and vote. I hope that they also go out and campaign for the right candidates, choose the most qualified candidates for the job, because the future of our country is at stake. So this ends our voter conversations for today. Thank you to our amazing young women leaders, George Escoto, who had to leave, Carmen de Guzman also, who had to drop out because of connectivity issues, Stephanie Landicho, you're still here, wonderful, Maika Reambonanza, and the two mayors, Mayor Trina Firmalo Fabic, Mayor Sweet Cirilis, people, may your tribe increase. Thank you too to our events team from the Ateneo, to Danny Gonzalez from the Women and Gender Institute of Miriam College, to all of you who participated in this voter conversation for Women's Month. As we end Women's Month, let me greet you all happy Women's Month, and remember, vote and vote wisely.